All right, let's get started. Welcome everybody, especially to those filtering in. My name is Jim Tung. I am a member of the steering committee of the Oregon Science Startup Forum, which is an event hosted by the Portland section of the American Chemical Society. I welcome everybody to the virtual 2020 Oregon Science Startup Forum. So this week we'll have 5 panels. We were hoping to host it on the YouTube channel, but apparently YouTube isn't loading right now. So instead you get the live real thing via Zoom. Our panels this week are this one, what is it like to be a science entrepreneur? On Tuesday, from an idea to a business. On Wednesday, how do I form a company? On Thursday, how to fund your startup. And then on Friday, we'll have a live pitch coaching session titled Practice Your Pitch. So each day around 11:50 or 11:55, you'll get a direct link. And we really welcome questions, so don't hesitate to, when we open it up for questions, to either put it in the chat box or to just ask your question. We will risk the video and audio to see if we can ask questions. So I want to thank all of our speakers and for their time and their flexibility with dealing with things around the pandemic. And then I want to thank all the attendees for coming. It's our hope as the ACS that we are empowering you to start your own business and that you'll need to know the steps to take. Going to take a brief moment to thank our sponsors, who are Onami, Absci, Otrati, Illumina, the Berglund Center at Pacific University, and Virtue Lab. So next, I have the distinct honor of introducing our panel moderator and first sponsor. Skip Rung is the founder, president, and executive director of Onami, Oregon's first signature research center. It's an unprecedented collaboration amongst Oregon's research universities and the private sector. Its mission is to accelerate research and commercialize technology via startup and spin-out companies. Before Skip founded Onami, he was the director of advanced research and development at HP's Corvallis campus, and he began his industrial career in 1977 at Hewlett-Packard Laboratories in Palo Alto, California, after receiving his bachelor's and master's from Stanford University. So Skip, thank you for your support this year and every year, and I'm turning the panel over to you.
All right, thank you, Jim, and it's great to be back at what is absolutely our favorite event of the year, and I hope this works out well for everybody. Zoom has been pretty good for me in a lot of formats, so we're fortunate to have a great panel today. A couple of people who've done this before, Beth Bosley of Boron Specialties and Dana Garbus of Oregon Brew Lab. And then joining us for the first time is Devin Wiley of Circumvent Pharmaceuticals. So we have tremendous technical and science diversity, which I think will be really fun. But we're going to let Beth and Dana and Devin tell you their stories, how they became science entrepreneurs, and a little bit about their companies and what they're up to now. Maybe 5-6 minutes for each of you, and then we'll come back with some questions from me to the panelists, and we welcome questions via chat in the Zoom, and Jim will be watching that, and to the extent I can, I'll be watching that, but we do want to address the questions you have to the panelists, not just the questions I have, although I guess they're kind of time tested as being useful things to know. So Beth, why don't we start with you? Tell us about yourself and about Boron Specialties.
Oh, thanks very much, Skip, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for joining. This has been a great venue over the years. It's a little different this year, but hopefully next year we can get back to a more normal meeting venue. So I'm Beth Bosley. My company is Boron Specialties. My husband and I co-founded Boron Specialties with me as the science and he as the finance and business development. He did keep an outside job, so that helped us keep income coming in for the first probably 6 or 8 years of the company. But we found that there was a market need for expertise in my certain kind of chemistry, which is boron hydride chemistry, as you might guess from the name of the company. However, we started very slowly and we are entirely bootstrapped. So bootstraps meaning we don't have any outside investors. We went on our own savings and then plowback of operating cash flow once we did have incoming cash flow. We work on things that are pretty difficult chemistries and fairly low volume, high value chemistries. We started just with consulting, so it was just me consulting for probably the first 18 months. After that, we started doing some contract analytical for a local borate company. So that's sort of outside our area of expertise with respect to boron hydride chemistry. However, it was an income stream, and when you're a small business, especially a startup, you do what you need to do to provide income. So at that point, we built a lab in a leased space and hired our first employee, and that was back in 2012. Again, first we started with consulting, then we did some contract analytical, then we added a little bit of distribution, and then finally we started making our own products in about 2013. Very, very slow start to our company, but we tried to respond to the market need, which is a very important, I think, piece of advice that I'll have later, is that, you know, you might have the best idea in the world, but unless somebody wants to pay you for it, you don't have a business proposition there. So we have now, we're up to 8 employees. In fact, just trying to hire now with doing Skype interviews and whatnot. But we are all mostly chemists and engineers here. We do a diverse set of things. Our main markets are in defense, electronics, surface finishing, a little bit of pharmaceuticals, and a little bit of energy. So those are our primary means of sales. We do quite a bit of business development. We do quite a bit of technical customer service. Our products can be hard to handle because they're pretty hazardous. So solving our customers' unmet need is really the most important thing that we do here. We don't do research out of the blue. Every bit of research that we do here is market driven, and what we're doing is trying to make a product that will solve a customer's problem.
Well, sorry, I was muted. I think, well, that advice is worth everyone's price of admission. Thank you, Beth. Dana, let's go to you, your story and about Oregon Brew Lab.
Yeah, I'm Dana Garvis. I started and run Oregon Brew Lab, which is a beer analysis facility. So I'm a beer chemist. I was a green chemist going through getting my bachelor's at University of Oregon, and kind of didn't know what I was going to do with myself after college. So I went into water quality testing, which wasn't for me. And we can get into that a little bit, but I kind of was looking for something else and found that local brewery was looking for a chemist to do their quality control. And I thought, you know, I'm a chemist, I know quality control, and I like beer. So I started working for an Ninkasi Brewing Company. I built their lab. I built their sensory program. So that's the taste testing aspect of beer. And then I sent yeast into space, and I thought that was maybe the highest I could go in that position. So at the same time, I was finding that other brewery labs needed my help. Other brewers needed my help who didn't have labs, and home brewers needed my help doing quality control for them. So I noticed this void in the market. And so I left Ninkasi to start my own lab. And so I, like Beth, am bootstrapped with some investment from family, which has been since paid off. And so I own my business entirely and I'm not beholden to any investors, which is pretty awesome, especially when we get to the own boss part of our talk. And since, let's see, so I started in 2014, 2015. So I'm coming up on, 6-year mark, 5-year mark. I swear I can do math. And Let's see. I've since like grown the number of analyses I provide. So I don't just consult for quality control. I also do government and state government regulation and documentation. I work with the FDA. I also offer micro testing now, and I just got something that allows me to test for certain off flavors within beer. So I've been expanding the matrix that I offer, and then also, as Skip pointed out earlier, doing sensory classes with the consumer-facing side. So that's a little bit about Oregon Brew Lab, and a little bit about how I got here. I've been doing this particular panel, I want to say for 4 years, Jim. I don't even know now, but it's definitely one I look forward to.
Thank you, Dana. What a great story. All right, and Devin, welcome to your first time at the Oregon Science Startup Forum. So I'd love to hear your story, and so would our guests.
Great, thank you very much, Skip. It's a pleasure to be here. So my background is in translational medicine. I started originally as a chemical engineer. That's where I got my Bachelor of Science, and went into the MD PhD program at USC and in Caltech. I'll preface that by saying I was born in Forest Grove, went to Southern California for my education, and came back up to the Hillsborough area. So I feel like a salmon, coming back up here to start my family. So a native of the area. I completed my PhD in chemical engineering, focusing on how to design nanoparticles that cross the blood-brain barrier. And so my formal training was really in neurotherapeutic development. And my clinical training was out of Los Angeles County Hospital. So I really got to see kind of one of the most intense clinical training programs you really can have out of that area. So really ran that entire gamut, and decided that didn't really have the interest of practicing as a clinician for my entire life. After going through such a rigorous training program, I thought that all of that could be much better used starting a company or creating a new technology and pushing that forward really from A to Z. What we like to say in translational medicine is from the benchtop to the bedside. You really have that entire training spectrum. And so I quickly went into private industry, worked with a couple of smaller companies that were in the nanoparticle chemotherapeutic space. Ran everything from their medicinal chemistry and basic chemistry, synthesizing these nanoparticles, all the way to phase 2 clinical trials. I was designing and heading up some of these trials here. And after a few years of experience on that, the last program I was working on, the asset was acquired by Novartis, and at that time, one of my co-founders at Circumvent had approached me about Circumvent. He sat me, it's a classic story. He sat me down at a coffee shop, showed me a paper. We started drawing out reaction schemes on a napkin, and he very quickly convinced me that this idea had merit. And so we moved forward. We decided that we were going to create this company. We're focused on a small molecule therapeutic for an ultra-rare pediatric disease. It's called Batten disease. It's actually quite devastating. These children have rapid neurodegeneration, so much that they appear healthy at about 1 year of age, start showing their first signs and symptoms. Usually they go blind first, and they're eventually in a vegetative state by the time they're 5. They typically will die by the time they're 10 to 15 years of age. So truly a horrible disease with no disease treating options. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to jump on to this company, because it was truly a noble cause. Nobody was really working in this disease space at the time. And civilization had put a lot of investment into my education, and this was one way that I felt I could pay back that investment. So we've been working forward on this particular small molecule program over the last 4 years. I've spent the majority of my time raising money. I am not bootstrapped. It is very difficult to push a pharmaceutical to the clinic on your personal savings and friends and family. We have to raise tens of millions of dollars to get through even a phase 1 clinical trial. So a large part of my work as a chief medical officer and head of research and development is selling the company to investors, defending the company, defending the technology, defending the clinical trial plan, the clinical regulatory program. We have been fortunate to have some very good early on investors. One of our first major investors was Y Combinator, if you're familiar with that from the tech side. I'm a YC alumni, so I'm more than happy to talk to any of you guys about that. If you're interested in the YC program, I can help out with that. I'd say the second biggest part of my job is really heading up the research and development. So that means managing our chemistry program, our formulation program, our toxicology and safety pharmacology program, our clinical regulatory program. A lot of consultants, a lot of contractors. We only have about 8 people that are internal to Circumvent, but I would say that under my umbrella, I manage probably between 20 and 30 people any one time. So a lot of emails that I have to respond to. And when I can, I try to hold one-on-ones as well with as many people that I can. I will stop there. I'm sure there's lots of questions. I can keep going and answering more, but that gives a high-level background to the company myself.
Fantastic. Another great story. Thanks, Devin. So for people on the call, you've heard 2 cases of bootstrapped entrepreneurship, which is a great way to go. And then you've heard a case where someone needs to raise and really does need to raise capital. So it's not a one-size-fits-all world out there in science entrepreneurship. But let's go to kind of our first question from me to the panel. Since we have people out there that Jim has encouraged, to be encouraged and confident about starting their own company and becoming a science entrepreneur, tell us how you spend your day as a science entrepreneur and how is it different than being a scientist or an inventor? And you can go in any order you like.
I'm happy to go first. One of the things I like about being a science entrepreneur is the relative diversity of things that you do. So on any given day, I could be in the lab, I could be in our pilot plant, I could be talking to DOD, I could be doing some customer service, I could be unloading a truck or loading a truck. There's really no end to the diversity of jobs there are for a scientist entrepreneur. So I think you really do have to like doing whatever is necessary at that time. You won't be spending your time doing research. You may not be spending your time giving talks. You may not be spending your time on anything very, very, very high end, but whatever it is, it will be essential for that day and that moment in your company.
All right, great. Dana, how about you?
I really like that. That's so accurate. The diversity of jobs, like I have a huge list of things and that pretty much just like covers it. There's like so many things that I do that's not just bench work. I spend a lot of time doing emails, answering emails, trying to make clients happy, trying to get new clients, trying to convince old clients to use new services. I feel like I spend my entire life on Excel. Maybe you feel that way too. I do spend a little bit of time on social media, trying to keep up with beer memes. It's hard to really talk about that being a part of my time when you're talking about healing children. But I also spend a lot of time trying to manage just basic relationships within my community, within my industry, and then also within where I got my education through chemical, like American Chemical Society related stuff. So not just focusing on the beer aspect, but also the chemical aspect, and then all through college, and then also through my time at Ninkasi and through Brew Lab is educating others about not just using beer as a gateway to make people think science is cool, but as a way to show that education is valuable in all aspects in all industries, including a place like beer. And then also I put this, I spend a lot of time like starting blogs, but not actually finishing or publishing them.
I think you prefer Instagram. Is that your favorite social media?
Yeah, I do. I like the platform of social media, but occasionally I might retweet something.
All right. Okay, Devin. So anyway, so we've heard from the two bootstrapped entrepreneurs what they do. It could be your answer is a little different, but what does your day look like as a science entrepreneur?
What does my day look like? Oh my gosh. Typically, I'll have data packages I have to review in the morning to prepare for meetings. Most of my day is spent in meetings, talking to people or responding to emails, usually around the development of the program. We've got about 5 different programs that are running within this overarching drug development program. And so the very beginning of the day is just reviewing the data, making sure that I understand what we're going to be discussing for the day. By 9 o'clock on average, I'll have about 15 or 20 emails in my inbox, and I will try to address as many of those as possible. And then usually 9:30, 10 o'clock, I have my first meeting. Which as the head of a program, you're often leading these meetings, and they'll often be 5, 7, 10 people sometimes on them. So you got to be up on the top of your game, talking about sometimes very complex concepts. So this morning I was talking about Wittig reactions, right? So for organic chemistry, and so I have to be up on all of those chemistries, all of the reaction conditions, the separations, and speak to groups of PhD level chemists, chemical engineers. It takes a lot of mental equivalence. Usually I'll go and take a walk or a run to clear my head, to recharge, which I think is very important, personal health and mental health. And then in the afternoons, it's just more of the same, talking with investors. I usually will take no more than 1 investor meeting per day, because those are like defending your PhD in front of a panel. It's some very sophisticated investors will grill you, and it's challenging to defend yourself. Their job is to find where you break. And so I try not to take too many of those per day. And then, at the end of the day, I usually will close off with a final meeting with 1 or 2 of my close colleagues that I can debrief and invent a little bit. Again, going back to mental health, but it's a lot of work, and every day is something different and something new. It keeps me on my toes. I love it.
What a great answer. Thank you. So should I infer that investors are approaching you, or is it the other way around? It sounds like you're throttling that one.
Both. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I would say I don't want to make it sound like it's 50-50. About 10% of our interactions are investors who approach us. 90% is we're reaching out, or we're having follow-up from relationships we've developed over the years.
Great. All right. Well, we have our first panel question, and Dana has already offered to answer it. I think everybody can see the chat. Anyway, so Dana, take it away.
No problem. Yeah. So as Skip pointed out, for social media, I prefer Instagram. I like that it really focuses on images and in the moment, sort of with the stories. I feel like Facebook is a dying platform. That's just my experience, in my opinion. Twitter's pretty good too, for the most part. But I just want to say that in terms of managing relationships with other businesses or with individuals that are your clients, I would say that going to conferences within your industry, so something like this, the American Chemical Society Business Startup Forum, this is an awesome way that I stay involved in ACS. And it's a way that I network every year and meet other chemists. When I want to talk to brewers, I go to the Master Brewers Conference. Those are, twice a year. I go and see people within my industry, within my field, within my industry. So if I want to reach out to marketing people within the beer industry, I'm going to go to something called the Craft Brewers Conference, which is a little bit different and much more geared towards the marketing and the business element of beer. So one of the ways to maintain good business relationships is to stay sort of involved in all the different elements within your scope. So within my scope, it's chemistry, it's beer, it's cider. So going to cider conferences or tastings, I also deal with, that. Same with kombucha, hard seltzer, these other things that my business is pivoting a little bit towards as we see brewers start to pivot towards as well. So staying like really involved is a good platform, and it just depends within your specific industry outside of, just chemistry as a whole, sort of what avenues that's going to look like.
Thank you, Dana. So while we're at it, I was going to ask you all a question about any special learnings or insights or tips for people in these days of COVID where physical networking isn't happening much. Maybe we'll start with you, Dana. I mean, how much of a handicap has it been? Has it maybe been a boon, or how's it working for all
Yeah,
of you?
my sensory classes have had to stop. I think that's one of the hardest hits to the beer industry and any drinking industry, is that we've really built the identity of craft beer around community and being physically intertwined with other people, and you're cheersing, your glasses are touching, you're tasting someone else's glass, you're passing beer cans around saying, hey, try this, taste that, what do you think of this beer? And that's something we just can't do anymore. So how do you continue that connection? And so we've the beer industry is relying heavily on live tastings, offering a set of beers you can go and pick up at their tap room, or that they'll drop off at your home depending on your state and their federal law or in their state laws, and just trying to do things virtually, kind of hanging on to that together alone phrase, basically. We're alone, but we can still drink together.
How about you, Beth? How has the switch forced virtual affected you and any of its people?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty difficult. We've managed to learn how to operate in the lab, maintaining distancing, and the high touch areas are cleaned every day, those sorts of things. But not being able to visit with customers, that's a main focus of our business. So number one, some conferences, of course, have been canceled. Some trade shows have been canceled that we would ordinarily attend and interact with many customers at once. We had travel scheduled to various customers that have all been canceled now. So that's difficult. Calls are fine, and that's how we're managing now, calls both via phone and via Skype or Zoom. But it's just not the same as being there together with a customer. So we're hoping that can start again here later in the year.
Okay. Devin, it sounds like your business is to some degree virtual to begin with your platoon of experimenters out there, but what's it been like for you?
Really, the only impact COVID has had with us is increased timelines. With a pharmaceutical program, it is a very long process. There's a lot of moving parts, and to a certain extent, most pharmaceutical companies rely on contractors, contract researchers, contract manufacturers. Sometimes even the larger pharma will have contract researchers, especially running their animal studies. For us, our team is far and by large virtual. There's really no need for us to go into the lab. We simply couldn't do it anyways. We don't have animal facilities to run GLP studies, good laboratory practice studies, and so on. So for us, the main impact is, for instance, our toxicology studies were being performed in China. China shut down, right? So our program shut down. Our chemistry was being run in New Jersey, and during the major spike in COVID in New York and New Jersey, that effectively shut down as well. Everybody stayed home. So we've had to adapt, and a common theme from me is going to be investor management, investor relationships. Our investors have been very understanding about this, because they certainly need a return. They expect a return on their investments for their investment thesis, and we've just had to keep them up to date. We've had to communicate with them more and let them know what's happening as much as we can, so be good stewards of their money and in our program.
Thank you, Devin. You may see in the chat, there's a question for you, Devin, about working with Y Combinator, which I found interesting too, that they're doing an early stage pharma company.
Yeah. YC, for those of you who don't know YC, they've been around for a good 20 years. Some of their more well-known alumni are Airbnb, Reddit, Dropbox. Those are the companies that have done very well. Over the last, I would say, 3 years, YC has decided to breach out of the tech space, more of the traditional tech and SaaS, so software as a service space, and go into bio. And they initiated a YC Bio program, I think it's now 3 years ago. Is very different than their other more traditional programs. Probably the biggest difference is that there's more money involved. I think YC typically will take 7% of your company for $150,000 at the seed stage. For YC Bio, they will give you up to $1 million for 20% of your company. I think so. That is the deal that we decided to take, and it was a strategic decision for us, especially since becoming a Y Combinator company gives an extraordinary amount of credibility. It opens your network up incredibly. And the process of becoming a Y Combinator alumni really does up your entrepreneur game. It does make you a better entrepreneur. You're being, for instance, I was trained by Paul Buchheit. He was one of the early Google people who wrote the original source code for Gmail. I got training from the co-founders of Airbnb. You really get to learn from some serious entrepreneurs, and you get to ask them questions real time, and what better knowledge, what better resource could you have than these folk? I would say one of the main advantages about the Y Combinator program is their demo day and their network at the end of the process, where largely Silicon Valley investors will all come on 2 days to listen to all of the YC companies give their pitch. And they are there with their wallets open for the purpose of investing into Y Combinator companies. And that was really what got our seed off the ground. We struggled for a long time trying to raise from traditional biotech investors. And through the demo day process, we were able to fully meet our seed goals, our seed round goals, and get this company going, and to get the right investors onto our cap table at the seed rounds that could tee up a Series A, right, to get to that next level. So I would say, the Y Combinator program really is an incredible catalyst if it makes sense for your company. And that's a big caveat. If it makes sense, you have to do what's right for your company. And if you don't need it, if you can bootstrap, I highly recommend that. But there are intangibles. There are intangible benefits that come from going forward with the Y Combinator program. I would say it was a very good experience for me, and I would recommend it.
A little bit, Devin, a little follow-up for me. How rigorous and challenging was it getting selected by Y Combinator? I imagine that was a pretty competitive process getting in. Yeah, it's harder to get into Y Combinator than it is to get into Harvard. That's what they say. It's extremely competitive. Yeah, that was one of the first statements that they made is congratulations, you made it, and really it was the best of the best. The founder of Y Combinator, he came and he talked to us, and he was asked what is your one regret about Y Combinator? It was to that point. He said, I regret that Y Combinator has become so elitist because the Airbnb guys were not elite, the Dropbox guys were not elite. And they know that Y Combinator is no longer what it once was. It was originally founded to give a seed to 20-somethings out of their garage who had a crazy idea.
and really boost them. And now it's like you have to have 3 co-founders with either a JD, MD, or PhD from Stanford, Harvard, or Caltech. You have to have McKinsey consulting experience. It really is a different phenotype of persons. Not everyone. I don't say you have to. There were quite a few people who just had brilliant ideas and really good salespeople. But I would say it was a very rigorous process getting in. The interview process. I mean, you're sitting in front of executives of Microsoft, Google. They're grilling you and they're tough on you. So I would say it is a tough process. Once you're in, it's extremely difficult. It is very rigorous once you get in there. But that said, you are so much stronger coming out of it. It does make you a better entrepreneur.
Fantastic, and congratulations to you for that. That's pretty impressive.
Yep, thank you.
I have another question for all of you, and you can take it in any order. Many entrepreneurs have described their lives in terms of really high highs and really low lows and a lot of personal sacrifice. Has that been true for you? And feel free to share a best day at work or a worst day at work story, if you like, with our audience. High highs, low lows, and personal sacrifice.
Sure, happy to go. I think that's true, especially of a very small bootstrapped company. You might be struggling to make something and then finally figure out the chemistry and finally figure out how to get that scaled up and get it to your customer. That's a really good day when your customer's happy and you're happy and everything is going right in the lab. Those days are pretty few, I'd say. Usually it's the struggle. It's, you have a couple of days of the high, but then you're right back to it where you're trying to make the next thing, because you can't just, we'd all like to go home for a week or something when we accomplish that goal, but there's something else waiting to be figured out in the lab. And as far as low, we don't have a lot of low days here. I would say, if there's some small incident in the lab, those are pretty low days, because you just can't, you have to be prepared to respond, especially in my business. I work with some pretty hazardous chemistries, and we're always prepared, and we always do a risk analysis where we do things. However, it's always possible that something will happen. Those are pretty low days.
So you're carrying a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, certainly. We're responsible for our employees' safety, our own safety, our community. There's just a tremendous amount of risk analysis that has to go into everything that we do.
Yeah. Pyrophoric probably isn't a word most city councils really like, if they know it. All right,
No,
Dana or
that's
Devin?
true. They don't really know.
Yeah, high highs, low lows, absolutely. I think what I like best about I like the beer. I like walking into a brewery and being able to go straight back into production and sort of walk past the tap room and kind of feel like a badass. I like solving problems with brewers. I like kind of having a dialogue back and forth while we're trying to figure out a problem. I know that that's a situation that sucks for them, but it's really a highlight for me, because it's just sort of like, we're putting in so many variables and so many factors. Like, how can we figure out, I don't know, why your lager's amber? We have there's a lot of steps that we got from, the beer in a tank to the beer in a can to the beer is now amber. So let's talk through it and figure out where that came from, and then see, do we have tests to back up that info? So I love that process. It's so much fun. I get a lot of satisfaction out of it. What I don't like, I hate chasing invoices. I hate telling people they owe me money. It's like probably just the worst thing in the world. I just, I don't really like the business element of my business, the logistics behind it. I like the business of my business, but I don't like, I don't like opening my, financing app. And I don't like right now that I'm kind of in this weird holding pattern because of the pandemic. It's sort of this interesting place to be at, and that's a little bit uncomfortable. I think I'm feeling it a little stronger because of the pandemic, but generally there is a sort of uncertainty from day to day, especially from a bootstrap, like where I don't have a ton of cushion to fall on. I also cashed my 401k, which was measly at my age when I cashed it, but I don't have one. And I think that there's a lot of personal sacrifice, right? I had to owe my husband money while, when he invested in my company, but I just invested in his, so now it's great. I think that what I like the best about being a science entrepreneur is just sort of that, like, every day there's like a passion moment where I'm like, yes, this is awesome. I don't have a typical 9 to 5, and I like that. As for low lows, for me, I would say my low lows are, there's so many irons in the fire at any given point that like something's going to get burnt. And it's when those moments come around and then like 3 things have burned and you're like, wow, what's happening? I just had this all in order a few days ago. And then suddenly, when you're juggling so many things, something's going to fall. And I think those are the low days for me, is when it just so happens that day, 4 people are unhappy with you. That's the worst, I would say.
Real life. Devin, how about you? Is it been a series of high highs and low lows, or personal sacrifice, or what's that like for you?
Yeah, there's definitely personal sacrifice. I've got a 3-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son, and sometimes there are fires that have to be put out at night. I sometimes will take meetings at night, and that cuts into story time. That cuts into to the whole process with the kids. And sometimes in the mornings I've taken calls before the workday because I've got clinicians I work with in Germany or contractors in China. And so there definitely is time away from family, and it is painful. It really is painful because it's a special time especially with young children to cut into that time. In terms of the high highs and the low lows, I think last year I had one example where I had back-to-back travel. I traveled to Denver for a family patient conference, which was a high. I get to meet these kids. They're ultra rare. There's only about 1,000 of them in the developed world, and I get to go and interact with the families and the patients. And they have a dance at the very end of every one of these conferences, and I would just dance with the kids, and the parents are super grateful for your work. It's extremely meaningful. It's very emotional and very meaningful to be doing this type of work and to be interacting with them and have fun with them and have a little bit of lightheartedness in this very deep disease space. And so those are usually the highs for me, is getting to see these people that we're working so hard for, and there aren't too many of them. And so, the second part of this last conference that I went to is I had to fly immediately to New York, and I went to Manhattan, 10th Avenue, to the 15th floor of this conference room to pitch to an investor. And this particular guy was worth over $1 billion, and he didn't care. He didn't care about the kids. He wanted to make sure that he was going to have a company investing in that fit his thesis, and that it was de-risked to his satisfaction. And so it was, for me, I think that really highlights the extremes of the space that we live in. Is you can get very, very deep into the human level, the human connection level, and then realize that business is cold. Business is very cold. And I think that was probably one of the biggest lows I had. was finishing that meeting and going to my room and having that realization of not everybody feels so altruistic as I do. You know, and so it's just keeping that reality. And I think this comment was made before. You have to make something that people want to buy. Now that's a YC mantra: make something people want. I certainly am making something that my customers, the patients, want, but it's not necessarily what investors want, and they're my second customer, right? Is the investors, and so you know, it's a stretch. It's a stretch between the two.
Yeah. Wow. Great story. Switch gears a little bit. A popular conception about running your own company is that you are your own boss, and that's a great thing. Are you your own boss? And if not, who is? Who are you accountable to? Any order? What's that like for you? I know Dana was waiting for this one.
I know that's a popular conception that you're completely your own boss, but you know what I find is that we are accountable to our employees. We are accountable to regulators. We are accountable to our community. We are accountable to our customers. And so while it's true you can choose what you want to work on, it has to somehow generate a profit for your company, and your customers and your employees have to be happy with you at the end of the day, or you won't have either. So while you are independent, more so than you would be if you were in a large corporate organization, there are many people to whom you're accountable.
And that's true even if you have financed the company yourself.
Yeah, I think it's a yes and no sort of thing. Yeah, I am my own boss. I get to make my own decisions, but you know, you're only a boss if you have work. So, so that's, you know, no work, you're not a boss. You're just someone who answers a lot of emails. I think for me, what I like is that I'm my own boss in that I determine the direction of my company and what its mission statement is, right? I also am altruistic in that I don't plan on selling this company to make billions. Like, that's not really why I got involved. I got involved because I wanted to make Oregon beer the best beer in the country. I wanted to make Oregon beer the reason people come to Oregon. I wanted to improve our quality, make it, you know, last longer on the shelf so states outside of Oregon can taste how amazing our beer is. And I, you know, I don't have any plans of selling, and that's, I think that shocks people sometimes. But, you know, I get to decide, you know, one of the things I have to deal with is sexist or inappropriate beer labels and names. And one of the things I get to decide is, no, I'm not gonna test that beer. I don't, you know, this is a women-owned business, and you're making a boob joke. Like, I don't, you know, no thanks. And so I love that kind of power, or I love that kind of ability to turn down business I don't need or want to support. But then, you know, on the other hand, like, you do have to make compromises in some ways. So where you can, and I think that just having control over a small little train on this railway of life, I think it's just nice to have the ability to say yes or no to something. And that's what's great about being your own boss. What's not great is that, honestly, I think that I'm probably much harder on myself than my clients are on me. But I think that that's kind of what drives me, is like, if I can meet my really high standard, hopefully that's good enough for like 98% of my clientele.
Wow, ton of wisdom in all of that. Devin, how about you? Are you your own boss, and how's that working out?
Do I answer to anyone? No, except all of, but it all comes down to accountability, right? I don't want to be accountable. It would be irresponsible and, in my space, unethical, right, to be a single person driving something that is so important to this patient population. And so it's ethically and morally imperative to put checks and controls on the company. And so, which makes your company stronger, but it's the right thing to do for the patients. And so I don't make any decision without an expert consultant in place. I always make sure that there's somebody with 20 or 30 years of experience in the room who is guiding, and it's my job to listen. And so I'm also a professional listener, and I think that that's absolutely critical for the strength of the program. And we wouldn't be where we are right now if it was just me making decisions. So I'm accountable to my consultants. I'm accountable to my contractors, listening to them. And as I go through this regulatory process, I have Scott is on here. He was helping me with the regulatory process for one of our programs. I'm accountable to the FDA. I'm accountable to the EMA, which is the European forum, working with Germany. They have BfArM. So I have so many regulators that I am accountable to. I cannot just willy-nilly go out and do what I want to do. And so in terms of answering to anyone directly in the company, no. I could do what I want. That said, there's very little that I can do without asking somebody.
Great answer. Thank you, Devin. So we have an audience question. Of course, you can all see it on chat, but I'll read it. And I think this is interesting because Devin has raised capital and needs to. Beth and Dana have not chosen to. But the question is on bootstrap versus investor-centric startups and sustenance. Other than trying to raise capital, could investor involvement be considered a risk mitigation aspect? If so, how would you gauge the vision of the investors to your vision for the startup? And since that's the path not taken, Beth, I'm curious if you or Dana have any perspective on that.
Sure, yeah. So I think bootstrapping the company was a great way for us to start. It's good not to owe anybody any money for some period of time. But by the same token, we've done a lot of thinking about this, that when you have to pitch to investors, you have to examine your business and you have to make sure that that everything you think about the business is actually correct, because just as Devin has said, those investors are probably smarter than you are, and they will find out if what you think about the business isn't correct. So getting feedback from a group of people who are not directly involved in your business, I think is probably a pretty good thing, just to make sure you can keep on track. If you need their money, then in the end, I think you do have to be sure that both your vision and the investors' visions are aligned. If not, there's going to just be constant problems. There's going to be constant headbutting, and neither the investor nor the science entrepreneur is going to be happy about it. So that feedback loop, I think, is very good, but you need to pick the right investor in the end.
Yeah, I don't have investors, and I'm not looking for investors. I'm not sure what sort of pivot I'd have to do in order to actually start asking for money from people. But I will say that a number of my programs, my microbiological programs, so testing for beer spoilers, and also my off-flavor program, were both started because of investments from breweries who wanted those tests. So while I wasn't out looking for investors, I did have local Oregon breweries contact me and say, hey, I see you're not doing these testing. Can we throw money your way and get free testing in return so that we can jumpstart that program for you? And that's happened twice now with my micro and with my off-flavor testing. So maybe, investing in sort of the Kickstarter way, or investing in terms of sitting in front of a bunch of venture capitalists and throwing out your pitches, or even something specialized where it's a one-on-one. I think every single investor relationship is unique. So maybe it doesn't look exactly like Shark Tank, but it is still buy-in from clients or from people outside your organization.
All right. So a strong theme of listening there from all of you. Thank you very much. We have another audience question. When presenting to numerous investors, what are the best ways to ensure that the key ideas and one's secret sauce do not leak, that is, to competitors? Any thoughts on that?
I guess I'll take that one. Yeah, it's a dance. When you're talking with lots of different investors have different investment theses. They're looking for different things, and you'll likely have, I don't even know how many investor decks we have at this point that are different flavors of our story, a lot. And we always start, and most investors prefer this, and some investors require this, to have a non-CDA conversation first. Some investors won't sign a CDA. It's just not worth their time for initial process. So you have to have a CDA or an NDA as a non-disclosure agreement. Once you get to the point where you have a mutual agreement that it makes sense to move to the next stage, you will usually put in at least a one-way, if not a two-way CDA into place, or NDA into place. And even then, if you have a trade secret, you don't have to disclose everything. We don't disclose what our small molecule is. If we have a code name for it, we call it Circ 825, so Circ for circumvent. And we will describe what it does. We'll describe its medicinal chemistry properties, but we don't actually show them what the compound is. And investors, for the most part, don't need to know. If they ask you for what would be otherwise a trade secret, that's a red flag. You run the other way, right? You don't engage with those investors, and it goes back. It goes back to Beth's point. Not all investors are your friends. Some investors, in your relationships with them, can go sour, and that can get really nasty. It can get really ugly, with legal repercussions. And so you have to be really careful about that. So I'll go back to my original statement of it's a dance, right? It's about your comfort level in the conversation, in the process of the conversation. And it's a process. These things take time. It's very rare that you have one meeting and somebody says, here's I'm going to cut you $1 million check. It usually is a lot of conversations, a lot of diligence. So you only disclose what you're comfortable disclosing.
Great answer.
I would add to that, Skip, that a lot of people who want to invest in a company like mine are larger chemical companies. We're just not a venture class company. So the people who might want to invest in Boron Specialties are in the chemical industry, and frankly might be potential competitors, depending on how much information we disclose during our discussions of their investment. So you really have to go slowly and be sure that something's going to work out before you get too far and give all your company information so that somebody then could become your competitor.
It's just a quick follow-up question for you, Beth. You're a small company. Have you relied on legal counsel to review agreements and things like that, or have you kind of done that on your own with common sense?
We generally do that on our own. One thing we've been lucky here is my husband and I both had long careers in the chemical industry. So neither one of us had all the aspects of what you need to have a company, but together we probably had 80 or 90% of it. So he can speak to all, finance issues, IT issues, legal issues, business development issues, and I can speak to customer facing issues and technical issues. So together we've been able to navigate most of it. We have used outside legal counsel on occasion, I'd say maybe 10% of the time.
Okay. Because one thing I'm always concerned about with small companies, they're working with the large company, in a material supply agreement the first time they send somebody something. Get that looked at if you haven't done this before.
Yeah, it can be difficult because the language is not language that I'm used to speaking. Luckily, my husband is.
We have another great question. Of course, you can all see it. Forums like this are great for hearing the experiences of other startup scientists. These perspectives help guide those who are new to this field. One avenue to receive this information is through podcasts and blogs. Do you panelists have any favorite things you listen to, or we could generalize the question for kind of tips and pointers that you'd like to leave with budding science entrepreneurs?
I don't have a whole lot of podcasts that I listen to. I do interact quite a bit with scientists in my field, certainly on Twitter, but also just well, when it's possible, in person. And I think I have a lot of friends who are leaders in business, and I'm able to speak with them, and we talk about our business versus their business and the best way to go forward. And I would say, a few things that I've learned over the years is that I think, especially in my field, but I think also in Dana's and Devin's, there's risk to any small business. And I think you have to be able to manage that risk. If there were a major incident, for instance, at Boron Specialties, it would be very difficult for a company like ours to survive a major incident. So first thing you should pay attention to is risk mitigation, and make sure that you have all the safety aspects that are important to your company covered. And then the next thing is just make sure you have a product that somebody wants to buy.
Okay, so you've selected for the things that are really important for your company. Okay.
That's right, exactly.
I would say podcasts aren't really my thing, but I bookmark and used frequently the Small Business Administration website. It is so insanely useful. It's where I pulled a template off, a like crappy Word document template for like a business plan, which wrote my business plan for Brew Lab. And I have since sent that template to a bunch of friends who've started their own businesses, because it is just, that administration functions solely to help you if you are trying to start a small business. And their blog posts are so informative, are so useful. I can't tell you how useful Small Business Administration website is. It is just chock full of knowledge, and they are constantly updating. So I highly, highly recommend that. And then there's some beer industry blogs that I follow. And one of the things that I did was create my own little, I guess you could call it a network, but we call it the Collaboration, which is me and two other women who are beer chemists, one in Denver and one in Vermont. And we've sort of created our own little network because we do the exact same thing, just in different parts of the country. And we've created sort of a collaboration network where we help each other out, send each other work, and we even started doing standard testing just within our little crew. So reaching out to other people who are doing similar things to you is, similar to what Devin was saying. It's a dance because you don't want to give too much away. But it's also rewarding because these are the people who know all the struggles and all the best parts of your job because they live it too.
All right. Thank you, Dana. And Devin, any thoughts on this one? Any resources that you particularly like and would recommend?
I'm going to parrot Dana. Podcasts are not really my thing. I used to listen to Freakonomics, but that didn't really have much to do with entrepreneurism. But I'll answer a different question, which goes to the root of this one, which is what resources from the business side. I think most of us are scientists and we can handle the science aspects of the company, but from the business side, the best advice that I can get is don't go it alone. Businesses, I heard this once. This is great quote. Science is hard to learn and relatively easy to practice. Business is easy to learn and really hard to practice.
That's good.
And for me, I would not have been I would not be where I am today without my co-founders who are more business focused, business centric. One of my co-founders IPO'd a company He sold a company to Novo Nordisk. He was involved in the early stages of the second company that just IPO'd. He's raised up to Series Bs. I have learned so much from this co-founder about the practice of starting a company and building it. And that would be one of my biggest pieces of advice, is that if you want to, especially if you're going to do a YC type of a path, you have to prove that you're going to be $1 billion company. They want the $1 billion story, and you need somebody who's really business minded, who's been through that process, who knows that process, to credibly build the story and tell the story. Don't try to go it alone. If you want to go to that level, get somebody to really help you who knows how to do this. You gotta respect those business people. It is a tough game. It is a tough game. They play in a whole different skill set to get to that level.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, Jim gave me the hook a few minutes ago. I said, is that true? And maybe you want to point us to what the rest of the week is like, even as we have more questions coming in. You've all been just fantastic. This panel just keeps getting better, and I thank you.
So thank you, Skip, and thank you all the panelists. So Beth Bosley, Devin Wiley, and Dana Garvis. If you want to, audience, if you could turn your video on and just give everybody a wave or a round of applause, that would be very much appreciated. Also, if you would like to contact any of the people, I can provide their contact information, or maybe they could provide a LinkedIn slot for you to contact them. I would like to remind everybody that this is a week-long thing, and so I will meet you tomorrow at noon for From an Idea to a Business. Our speakers will be Anna Brown of Starch Street Materials, Katrine Bosley, and Jen Amador of NextTC. So, and moderated by Dr. Andy Soria. So looking forward to see you then, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Goodbye now.
Bye. Thanks,
So
Jim.
long. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Skip.
So long.
Cheers. Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you.